What exactly is a beta reader looking for? That's one of the questions I see authors ask all the time. And surprisingly, there aren't many videos that actually walk you through the process. Hi, my name is Hilary Smith. If you're new here, welcome. I have a BA in creative writing and English, and I've spent the last 9 years beta reading manuscripts for authors. When I read your book, I'm not reading as an editor. I'm reading as your first dedicated reader, the person who notices where the story shines and where readers might disconnect. Today, I want to show you exactly what I'm paying attention to while I read. Pacing. One of the biggest misconceptions about pacing is that it's only about scenes dragging. Sometimes it's the exact opposite. I once beta read a thriller where the emotional and violent moments were rushed. It wasn't that the author didn't know what should happen. It felt more like they were afraid to stay inside those difficult scenes long enough for the reader to experience them. As a reader, I wanted to sit with those moments. I wanted to understand what the characters were seeing, feeling, and thinking. When important scenes are skimmed over, the emotional impact disappears. I'm constantly asking, does this scene stay too long? Does it end too early? Am I seeing the same information repeated? Does every chapter move the story forward? Good pacing isn't about writing faster or slower. It's about giving every important moment the amount of space it deserves. Confusion. Confusion is one of the biggest reasons readers quietly abandon books. Sometimes it's missing information. Other times it's sentence structure, flow, transitions, or simply too much happening too quickly. I'm watching for things like too many names introduced at once, confusing timeline jumps, inconsistent rules, unclear motivations, scenes that don't transition naturally. If I have to reread a paragraph just to understand what's happening, I make a note, because most readers won't stop and reread. They'll either keep going while feeling disconnected, or they'll stop reading altogether. Emotional impact. Sometimes a scene isn't technically wrong. It just doesn't make me feel anything. I once read a scene where a man was murdered by hanging. It should have been devastating. Instead, I felt nothing. Not because the event wasn't tragic, because the emotional cues were missing. The narration never invited me to experience the grief, fear, or horror alongside the characters. In every report, I ask myself questions like, did I laugh? Did I cry? Did I genuinely care? Readers won't remember every scene. They remember how your story made them feel. And that's something I've experienced firsthand. World building. World building isn't just for fantasy. Every novel has a world. Historical fiction, romance, thrillers, even small-town fiction. In fact, the very first manuscript I beta read back in 2017 was a small-town romance. The author told me the story took place in a charming little town, but I could never quite picture it. There wasn't enough description for me to understand where I was. As I read, I kept writing notes like, I can't quite see this place. Description is all about balance, either about the characters or about the story itself. Too much, and readers start skimming. Too little, and they lose the sense of place. Dialogue. When I read dialogue, I actually hear it in my head. I'm listening for whether each character has their own voice, whether the conversation moves the story, whether people are explaining things they already know just so the reader can catch up. Real conversations aren't perfect. People interrupt. They change subjects. They trail off. They misunderstand each other. The strongest dialogue teaches us something new, or about the story itself. At the end of the day, I'm not reading as an editor. I'm reading as your ideal reader. Someone who's paying attention to every moment where the story pulls me in, or pushes me away. But when I sit down to write your report, I switch perspectives. Now I'm looking at your manuscript through the lens of storycraft, giving you practical, actionable suggestions you can use during revision. To give you a better idea of what I mean, I thought I'd show you a couple of my reports. The first is from a final read. At this stage, my goal is simply to read the manuscript as a reader would and report my experience. The second report is from a first read of a working draft. This one ended up being 26 pages long, with 3 of those pages dedicated entirely to my overall reaction to the book. Google Docs was definitely struggling by the end. Fortunately, the author didn't mind. This wasn't a typical beta read. I knew she wasn't looking for a developmental edit, but there were enough opportunities to strengthen the manuscript that I naturally went much deeper with my feedback. The one area I intentionally left alone was voice. Since it was a first draft, I knew her voice would continue to evolve as she spent more time with her characters. If this video helped you better understand the beta reading process, let me know in the comments. And if there's another part of beta reading you'd like me to talk about, I'd love to cover it in a future